Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, June 27th, and we have a great show for you today. We have Amy Ingles, Brookline's Transportation Administrator, relatively new on the job. She has a big job to do. All things transportation in Brookline run through her. So we spent about a half hour with her earlier, and we're going to show that interview. But first, of course, we'll start with the news. The first United States presidential debate is tonight, moderated by Jake Tapper and Dana Bash from CNN. In a break from tradition, this debate is months earlier than typical, with a new set of rules and no live audience. A woman drowned at Glacier National Park in Montana on Sunday. Jillian Tones, 26, slipped on wet rocks into the water above St. Mary Falls, was swept over the 35-foot waterfall, and trapped underwater for several minutes. This past Tuesday, several states held their primaries with some results of note. Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who left her district after several scandals to run in a new district, won the Republican primary and is all but assured a return to Congress. New York Congressman Jamal Bowman, a member of the Squad, lost his primary to Westchester County Executive George Latimer by almost 17 points. The congressman has come under fire in recent months for several of his votes and actions in D.C. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey sent a state delegation this week to spread word along the southern border that Massachusetts shelters are full and unable to take any more migrant families. Following heavy rain, over 20 beaches across Massachusetts were closed this week due to high bacteria levels. In urban areas, beach closures are often caused by stormwater runoff polluted with pet waste. Elevated bacteria are particularly dangerous to those with weaker immune systems, such as children and the elderly. Boston Celtics' Jaylen Brown has offered a reward for the return of his lost ring and asks that whoever finds the ring contact him directly. The ring is from his personal sportswear brand, colored white and gold, with the Juice logo in the center and a green 7. Brookline Farmers Market is held every Thursday all summer long on the corner of Center and Harvard Streets. The farmers market has been running for 45 years, surviving COVID-19, and continues to foster a strong community home to 30 vendors and about 1,200 customers per week. An erratically acting, knife-wielding man barricaded himself for 4 hours in an apartment on Sewell Street last week. The police used a special response team robot and a pepper ball and were soon able to establish communication with him. The man emerged from the bathroom knifeless and was brought to Beth Israel Hospital for evaluation. Several cooling centers are open to the public in response to the declared heat emergency from the Brookline Department of Public Health and Human Services. Their locations, hours, and entrances are provided on the Brookline Town News portal. Folks, that's the news for the week. Stay tuned. On the flip side, we have a pre-recorded interview with Amy Ingles, Brookline Transportation Administrator. Stay right here on Brookline Interactive. And we're back here on TV. This week's guest is Amy Ingles. She is the Transportation Administrator for the town of Brookline. She's been on the job a minute. She comes to us by way of Florida via Georgia Tech. Delighted, Amy, for you to take some time with us. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now, Amy, getting from here to there is something we all care about. And in our little 6 square mile plot of the world in Brookline, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And there's not a lot of space to do it. And in many cases, the curbs have been in the exact same space for over 100 years, even though we've evolved our way of thinking in terms of transportation multiple times since then. So how do you make sense of it all?
Yeah, no, that's the that's the trick, right? We have a limited amount of space, and growing and changing needs, and I think that's been true ever since those curbs were put in place and probably even before. So yeah, part of it is talking to people and trying to understand what those needs are and what the specific needs are, where they're located. Some of that has to do with parking. We all know that parking does take up a lot of space, but it also is needed in certain areas for some people, especially. So we need to identify where those areas are and make sure that we're providing those for folks that need them, and the businesses that need them. But it also means, taking away some space that had been previously relegated to cars, I think, and repurposing them into something that more people can use instead of looking at, car throughput, looking at people throughput, whether that's on a bus or people using sidewalks, and people using bicycle facilities with bikes and other micro mobility devices. It's trying to balance all of those things and acknowledging that because we have this limited space, we need to make trade-offs, and we need to kind of tip the scales maybe a little bit from a more automobile focused type of design that is, let's be honest, like kind of overshadowed the way that design and planning has been done in our country for a long time, and maybe try to find a little bit more space for some other modes that will help us get to our climate goals, and create a place where people of all ages and abilities using all modes can feel safe and comfortable getting around the way they
So
want.
I want to talk about some high level things, but first, to make sure we check them off the list, I actually want to focus on some specific projects that maybe people know a little bit about, maybe they're experiencing and don't really know how it's all going to come together. And this sort of gives people an opportunity to be a little more informed. And I'd like to start with a project that I think maybe you've started painting just yesterday or it's coming soon. And that is the Gateway East bus lane trial.
Yeah.
That's a lot for people who haven't heard anything about it. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so the MBTA has been installing bus lanes and working on various types of kind of bus priority initiatives all throughout their system for a number of years now, and have hired a lot of really smart people on this team to identify opportunities for these types of things. So it's a very long time coming. The project here in Brookline definitely predates me by quite a lot. But this Gateway East area is a congested area. A lot of people are moving through there in a lot of different ways every day. And yes, some of those ways are definitely cars, but a lot of those ways are LMA shuttles, along with medical area shuttles. A lot of those ways are bikes. A lot of the ways are people, walking. And we also have two of the most popular bus routes going through that area, MBTA bus routes. So it seems, even though this project, the bus lanes themselves would be relatively short, it's such an important hub and an important set of intersections that people are traveling through, that the T saw an opportunity for creating a bus priority area to help get people through faster, not just vehicles through faster. Obviously, you fit a lot more people on a bus than you can, in just individual cars. So what they're trying to do is, improve the most popular bus routes now and make them even more popular, and just make it more efficient altogether.
And so we're talking about Gateway East, of course, that's sort of Route 9, kind of between Washington Street and Mission Hill, sort of the Jamaica Way or Arbor Way. I'm not sure which to Mission Hill. And you've got the 65 bus, which runs from Brighton down Washington Street and then to LMA. So it's loaded with nurses, medical technicians, the people who do the hard work in the hospitals that we maybe work at or certainly use. It's got the 66 bus, which runs from Nubian Square to Harvard Square, one of the heaviest bus routes of use in the entire Commonwealth. And that's going right up Harvard Street. So that's heavily used by Brookline. And it also actually has the 60 bus, which goes out Route 9. That bus not used as much, but for the folks who are relying on it, it's important. And I think the idea is if we can get those buses through, not just quickly, but consistently quickly, it helps the buses stay on schedule, helps them prevent them from bunching. And it's a trial, right? So it's going to go for a year. And you know, the engineers and the analysts are going to figure out what to do next. And that wasn't paid for with Brookline dollars.
Right. Yeah, Brookline is not, we are providing, you know, some of our time, some of our employees' time to help coordinate this, but we are not paying for any of it. But it does, you know, if it does become permanent, which we hope it will, it is our part of our system. So that's great. You know, we we love to be able to make those kinds of collaborations.
Now, a project that is adjacent to that leads right to it is the Washington Street project. And so I live right on Washington Street, and the user experience has been, the street is not in great shape. It got completely repaved, beautiful. And then with some upgrades, with some crosswalks, with some bike lanes, with some really nice improvements. And then several months later, in comes the gas company to cut it all up. And people say,
Right.
oh, tell us sort of like how that came to be, because I
Yeah.
know the transportation folks were thoughtful about that. And it came to be that way. So before we talk about what the project's for, like
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. No, I understand. I can completely understand how it looks, but I do promise you, like we were planning for all of it to happen that way. We knew that the gas company needed to go in there and do some major work. But we also knew that the condition of Washington Street was, you know, getting close to failing. Like we needed to do something, and so what we did was called a bonded wearing course, which we're actually looking to do at a couple other locations in town. It's kind of like a band-aid, to use that term, to preserve the pavement foundation underneath, just, you know, enough so that the company could come in and do what they needed to do, and the foundation would be okay to get us through all of that, to get us to the point where that complete streets redesign project that we're working on right now is ready to start being installed.
And so the Complete Streets project, that is, I believe that's coming from the tip, and I'll ask you to explain what the heck I'm talking about, because I
Yeah.
kind of don't. And then, you know, what's the timeline on moving curbs and sort of building this re-envision Washington Street?
Yeah, so it's a little ways out as far as like actually shovels in the ground. FY28 is the first year of funding, construction funding that we're looking at. So we're heavy in the design process right now. We've done a lot of public meetings. There's several more to come. We're really working with residents and businesses and you know, all of the different users of Washington Street to try to come up with this balance. You know, like we said in the beginning of, you know, we have this fairly constrained corridor with a lot of uses on it, a lot of people who live on it, a lot of people who shop on it, a lot of people who travel on it in many different ways, and we're trying to accommodate all of them. So it is a challenge, but and we need to have a lot of conversations to make it happen. But we were right in the middle of that process, and I think we're making really great progress.
Now, the project is sort of loosely speaking from Washington Square down to maybe where Washington and Harvard intersect, maybe even all the way to Route 9. And, you know, you've got driveways, you've got fire hydrants, you've got streets, you've got a fire station, you've got things that kind of gobble up curbside.
Yeah.
And then you've got sort of a new demand for some of that curbside space, and that is accommodating sidewalks and bike lanes, you know, multimodal or micromobility lanes, maybe even not on the street, but at the sidewalk level, because we know if there's a paved 6 square feet of land somewhere, a car will park in it, even if it doesn't belong there. And I know that that's sort of the geometry challenge. How do you think through the segments that are where parking is a higher demand, say near Washington Square or beyond Greeno toward Brookline Village, with the spots where, you know, if you look right now, there's open spots all the time. How do you think through, how do you measure it? How do you think through it? How do you sort of set criteria for those trade-offs?
Yeah, I mean, so we're working really closely with the consultant team who's helping us design this to find every efficiency that we can, every space efficiency that we can to provide parking that we know, is in demand here that is needed, whether it's for the businesses or the residents, or even just for short-term loading, people being dropped off by Uber or Lyft, uh, those types of those trips, and then also delivery drivers dropping off food and other items. We know that's a major part of our economy, and the needs of the people who live there. So yeah, so we're working to identify what spaces absolutely must, what areas of the corridor must have some sort of parking or loading facility near it. We're also looking at possibilities of side street, and being able to direct people for parking on some side streets or maybe other places in the village. And some of that we've already found in, our town-owned lots, like that. I think a lot of people who drive to the village, that they just don't realize that there's availability there. So some of that is just literally putting up signs and directing people to the places where parking exists today. We're also looking at some additional streets in the village that may have space if we kind of change the geometry of the existing parking or allow parking on a side where parking is not currently allowed. So we're really looking for every single inch of space and efficiency that we can find to accommodate as many, all the different needs.
And then is there any conversation about improvement for bus riders on Washington?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, again, with the really popular bus routes that go through Gateway East, a couple of those also go down Washington Street. So one of the initiatives another initiative that the T has been working on throughout their system is bus stop consolidation and just efficiency improvements. Sometimes the stops, there's kind of an ultimate spacing, optimized spacing that the T is looking to get between each stop. And sometimes they're a little closer together than what is optimum. And sometimes, maybe one stop is just, not a lot of people go to it. So maybe it could be consolidated, maybe one could be removed. They're also looking to make all of their bus stops ADA accessible, because not all of them are. Some of them are too narrow. Some of them, there's things in the way. The sidewalks are not in the right shape. There's a lot of different considerations when you're placing a bus stop. And so we're trying to work really closely with the T to do all of those things with this project as well, looking at some consolidation of stops that they brought to us that they wanted to do, and slightly moving some stops to make them in a better place that's safer for riders, that's easier for the buses to get into, that's easier to accommodate for ADA compliance. So yeah, we're looking at a lot of different stuff for buses as well, but that does take up space. Like some of them, it just weren't wide enough, and so we need to make sure there's that kind of door zone area so that they can drop down their ramp, for example, if there's a person in a wheelchair that needs to get on the bus or get off the bus, while that stuff takes space. So that's a big part of it as well.
So there's just so many moving pieces. I want to
Mhm.
move on to Beacon Street and the bridle path for
Mhm.
folks in the know. They don't need to hear the next minute, but the idea of the bridle path is to use the space near the Sea Line tracks, kind of where the angled parking is, to create a relatively narrow but incredibly useful mixed use path for cyclists, for people with strollers, for joggers, for anyone who wants to just sort of use the middle space. And of course, it's incredibly complicated because if you think squeezing all that stuff in Washington Street is tough, try doing it next to a moving train, right?
Yes.
How's that going?
Yeah. I mean, we are all incredibly excited about this project. It is, the actual design has not even really begun yet. So being constructed is many years out. But we're excited that we're moving towards it, and we're working on getting a consultant on contract to start the design. And it's going to be transformational. I mean, Beacon Street is already an amazingly important street in Brookline, obviously, and it's an iconic street. This project is going to make Beacon Street even more so. There are obviously complications that go along with it being close to the train tracks, of course, and permitting with the MBTA. There are trees that are closer to the tracks than, if the T was going to build that line today, than what they would do today. But there's still trees that we care about, so a lot of these decisions need to be made. There's probably utilities under Beacon Street that, we don't necessarily know are there. This is an old street that's been there for a long time. So there's a lot of complications that go along with it, and a lot of work to be done. But we're so incredibly excited for this transformational project.
And that project has had substantial funding from federal, state, and local ARPA sources, right? It really is trying to bring in money from all these different places because it is such a substantial project. There isn't money under the couch cushions to pay for it, but certainly very exciting. Let's talk about the regular stuff. I feel like folks started to complain a little more loudly about the condition of roadways, but I also know that we passed an operating override in part to fund more maintenance. And so are we going to see more pavement maintenance coming forward?
Yeah, absolutely. The big, transformational projects like the bridle path are important, but so are all the small and connecting streets and the streets that people, that people live on. And the surface of our streets is incredibly important to all modes. So we know that some of our pavement, in general, the average condition of our pavement in the town has decreased a bit over the years, and we are trying to do more to increase the condition to make it better on average, and really keep some of our streets from getting away from us, condition wise. And part of why this has been complicated for us historically is that we are, trying to, when we do pavement preservation work, we're also trying to incorporate complete streets practices and see what other design changes we can make when we do these projects to provide better bicycle facilities, for example, or to bring the sidewalks to ADA compliance if they're not, or to add additional features that are traffic calming devices such as bump outs and things like that, and make new crosswalks. There's a lot of things that we want to do. We want to take the efficiencies of doing them while the crews are already out there, but some of that stuff adds a lot of time, for one thing, to design it, to have a public process, and it also adds money. And it's not necessarily saying that we don't value these things when I say that it takes money, but maybe the pot that we're using to do pavement preservation is not the right pot to pay for those things. So we're looking at maybe there's other money that we bring in during these projects, and how do we prioritize that spending so that we're spending it on streets where the need is the greatest, where a lot of people are going to be walking, or a lot of people are going to be biking, because we can't do everything on every street all the time, and it's not needed. You don't need separated bike lanes, for example, on every single street. So just trying to target our spending and make sure we're being as efficient as possible. And it takes time to figure all that out.
You brought up bump outs and crosswalks, sort of other modes of traffic calming. And it seems to me that most motorists want everyone to drive very slowly in their neighborhood, but want to go as quickly as possible through everyone else's neighborhood. And so my understanding is that many neighborhoods have asked for traffic calming in their neighborhood. Yeah. What does that list look like? I mean, are you going to bang that out next year or two, or what?
Yeah. So the traffic calming, the idea of traffic calming and people wanting traffic calming has completely increased, not just for Brookline, but in a lot of our neighboring communities as well. The idea that slowing down traffic is safer for all modes is really started to catch on with people, I think, and people are starting to understand that. And cars are driving faster, like different apps and stuff that people use for navigation will direct people through neighborhoods. That didn't used to be the case, not even that many years ago. So when the traffic calming policy was written, we were living in a different world, than we are now. Delivery apps and stuff like that are much more popular. the environment, the landscape is different. So unfortunately, that policy just, as it's written, it lays out the procedures very specifically, of what should be done when a traffic calming request is made and how that request should be turned into a project. And it lays out a process that's too cumbersome for today's world, as it's written. So what we're trying to do is we have this list that's getting bigger instead of smaller. We can't, in using the process as it's written, we can't make the list smaller. We can't do more than 1 or 2 projects a year, but we're getting like at least 10 requests a year, something like that. So so we know that we need to make some changes. So we're in the process of working with our team and the commissioner, and trying to determine how to rewrite that policy to make it more responsive to the people who already have made requests and who will make requests, and to kind of shorten the timeline of like processing those requests, so that we can do more every year, so that they have the right size of a public process. We obviously have to have some public process, but I think what's laid out in the current policy is a little bit too much for to process all of the requests and to address the need that we have. But we also want to look, there's some data that was not available when this policy was written, like big data and things like that. And we want to be able to utilize that data instead of like, sending our people out to like collect data, which is great and all, but it is very time consuming. Maybe we can use some of this data and to kind of prioritize streets and identify streets that maybe didn't even get a request, but that really have that demonstrated need, so that we're not just, responding to the loudest the loudest voice, but actual data that's showing where the demonstrated need is.
And still, I imagine there's some sense of geographical balance, even if the 5 most needed projects are in the same neighborhood, right? The other neighborhoods need some
Yeah,
attention too. And so some
totally,
of it is in fact not technical, but political. And,
totally.
as if folks don't like what's going on, they can always go to the select board, and the select board may provide some additional guidance as the case may be. I only have a few minutes left. I'm hoping you can give us some reassurance for sidewalk users, particularly, but not limited to seniors. The trees and other things make the sidewalks a little more treacherous. And is there a process for that? And are our sidewalks degrading as quickly as the streets are? Are we going to make sure that folks who are moving around by foot are going to get there without falling down as well?
Absolutely. And that's kind of been part of the conversation, of the pavement preservation conversation, because that's one of the things that we want to do when we're preserving our streets. That we want to also look at the sidewalks and look at the curb ramps, and try to improve those when we can. It's actually a federal requirement to bring the curb ramps to ADA compliance when we do pavement preservation. But the sidewalks themselves are kind of how we prioritize those, and when we replace them or just do spot improvements, that's kind of more up to us, and we're trying to figure out the most optimal way to do that. So that's part of our conversation. We know how important the sidewalks are. They're not, we do have a condition assessment of them, just by looking at, by virtue of the types of materials that we use for sidewalks versus the type of materials we use for roadways. Sidewalks don't deteriorate as fast as asphalt does. So we don't, check the condition of those as often, but we do have a good condition report that we're using. And obviously there's, the trees have some impact to those as well. So it is a major priority, and, we're trying to maybe to look at kind of prioritizing it in a way that's not necessarily connected to the pavement preservation, because those things aren't always the same. Like it may be a really, a road that's in bad shape, but the sidewalks look great, or vice versa. So but it is part of the discussion and part of what we're trying to make as efficient and effective as possible.
Amy, I want to thank you for coming on TV here on Brookline Interactive Group today. We're out of time, which is great because I know you have so much to do. I don't want to take any more of your time away from making all of our highways and byways, our sidewalks, our bicycle infrastructure, our road infrastructure, our MBTA infrastructure work as safe and as comfortable and as efficient as it can for all of us. So Amy, get back to work. We're gonna keep hanging out on Brookline Interactive Group. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.